Welcome to Field Notes from a Christian Case Manager. This is Stephen Cook. Today I want to talk about dealing with clients who suffer from a cognitive impairment. Now that can be based on IDD, Alzheimer's, dementia, IDD being an intellectual or developmental disability, Alzheimer's most people are familiar with. Dementia, there's different kinds of dementia. There's Lewy body dementia and vascular dementia. Sometimes these are distinctions without a difference, because at the end of the day, we're still dealing with somebody who suffers from a cognitive impairment. And this is challenging when you're trying to provide care for these clients, because the normal ways that we approach people, where we employ language as a vehicle for the expression of ideas, and we want to share, we want to field information, we want to ask them questions, we want to engage them. And because of that cognitive impairment, there's a breakdown in that normal mode of expression. Now, as a Christian who comes at my clients from a biblical worldview, I see them as being made in the image of God with certain capacities, certain features about them. I think of Genesis 1, where God said, "Let us make man in our image according to our likeness." And so mankind is made in the image of God, the imago Dei, that we are finite analogs to God, theomorphs, and that we have certain features that are built into us, certain capacities that correspond to God Himself. And when I see somebody made in the image of God, when I think about what those features are, I think about consciousness, being aware of the environment around you. I think of self-consciousness, that when we look in a mirror, we identify, hey, that's Steve, I know who that is. Animals don't have that. I remember years ago watching underwater sea exploration, and they were doing some filming, and they put a mirror up in front of an octopus, and the octopus attacked it, and then wrapped its tentacles around it, and then backed off, and then attacked again, and then backed off, and got confused, because when the octopus looked in the mirror, it didn't see itself. When I hold my dog up in the mirror and I look, the dog doesn't look and say, "Oh, that's me." Again, self-consciousness is a feature that is true to humanity. It's indicative of who we are and what it means to be made in the image of God. I think that we also operate from a basis of morality that we have built into us as an intrinsic feature, a sense of morality. Now, I think that was skewed by the fall and the corruption of sin, but I still think that is present within us as human beings, because even though we're fallen, the image is still retained. We operate by volition. We have the capacity to make choices. But one of the features about us as human beings is that we have the ability to think on a rational level that is much higher, that sets us apart from all of the rest of the creation. And this capacity to think and to reason and to verbalize and articulate not only allows us to be able to interact with God Himself, who is reasonable. In fact, there's a wonderful verse in Isaiah 1:18 where God says, "Come, let us reason together, saith the Lord." And so God is reasonable, and He created us to function that way. And that's not only on the vertical, but on the horizontal, because when I engage with somebody else, I'm engaging in rational discussion. And we employ, we employ language every day as a reliable vehicle for the expression of ideas. In fact, I'm doing that right now. I'm operating on that assumption. And so I formulate thoughts in my mind, and I verbalize that, and it's being recorded digitally here and through the camera in front of me. And it's going to be transmitted, and you'll be watching this, you'll be hearing this on an electronic device, a phone, a tablet, a computer, a television. And because we have a shared bank of vocabulary, as your ears pick up on what I'm communicating, because we have a shared bank of vocabulary, we're able to do this thing called communication. We do this all the time with children, with family, when we're out driving, when we're reading signs, when we're reading the directions on a prescription bottle. We communicate all the time, and we operate on this assumption that, again, language serves as a reliable vehicle for the expression of ideas. When a client begins to suffer a cognitive impairment, that normal mode of expression breaks down. And where it becomes challenging is that you cannot employ language to try to understand them or to help them. You have to be a detective, but you have to rely on other things. You have to rely on their body language. You have to rely upon their tone. Are they excited? Are they angry? Are they sad? What are they communicating more on an emotional level? You're having to look at their environment. You're having to try to get information because, again, if you try to have a conversation with them, perception is not equal to reality in their mind. Now, at best, their perception may be a rough approximation, but in some cases, it's pure fantasy. And so, again, when you're having the conversation, there's that breakdown there, and that's quite challenging. Now, I remember one time going out and dealing with a client of mine. I was having some of my staff go out to visit with her, and this particular cherub, she was in her 80s, in her mid-80s, and she didn't like, she would come to the door in her birthday suit, let me put it that way. And this was a little off-putting to some of my staff. So I went out to visit with the client. Of course, she answers the door and little blue hair, and anyway, I'm talking with her, and you're playing poker, and you're keeping eyes on the eyes. But as I'm engaging with her, I realize we're not having a rational conversation. And so I left the home, and I called the daughter and tried to engage family and say, hey, look, can you be responsible for mom? Make sure she's got some clothes on. I don't know if that's possible. And the daughter was able to work some magic. A few times our staff went out. She was wearing a robe, but then sometimes she wouldn't tie the rope, so it was just like wide open. So again, didn't really help. But you cannot engage the client with language like, remember, I told you last time I was here. That's a trap. And as soon as you begin to employ that remember language, listen, that's an exercise in frustration for you. It's an exercise in frustration for them. Because you can have conversations with them, and 5 minutes later, they don't remember the conversation. They may not even remember you. I remember one time going out to visit with a client and sat in her driveway in a lawn chair. We were sitting in her driveway. I was petting her dog. Beautiful spring day, sitting out there, and I was visiting with her for about 20 minutes. I left and had to go attend to another client, came back about an hour later, knocked on her door and began to engage her, and she said, I don't know who you are. And I said, well, I was here just an hour ago. And she said, no, you weren't. I said, yeah, we sat in your driveway and talked. I petted on your dog. And she said, I don't know who you are. And again, it's one of those things where it's in the flow of the conversation that you have that aha moment where you realize that they don't remember. So when I come with language, when I come to try to evaluate them, I employ certain tactics. First of all, when I come, I realize that the normal engagement doesn't work of employing language. Now, when I do engage them, and you will, it's the way that we operate, we're human beings, remember, rational human beings, that when I approach, I try to approach them with very short sentences, very simple language. I slow down my speech, not in an exaggerated way, but I slow down my speech. I'm very conscious about my tone and delivery, because being frustrated doesn't help anything. And I'm looking at other cues. I'm listening to what they're saying, but I'm also looking at other cues. I'm looking at their environment. I'm looking at their stature. I'm listening to their tone. And you're trying to be a detective in other ways. So you have to find a workaround when you're approaching them. One of the verses that I think about when I'm dealing with clients that have Alzheimer's, dementia, or IDD is Galatians 5:22 and 23, where Paul says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love. Now, love here is a commitment love, not an emotional love. This is a commitment love. This is a commitment love that seeks the best interests of the other person. But it is not an emotional love. Now, emotion may be present, but do not confuse emotion with love. Love in the Christian sense is when we seek God's best in the life of the other person. It is sacrificial. It is open-handed. It gives without expecting return. It is free. It is open-handed love. And it gives out of the bounty of one's own resources, and is in no way predicated upon the beauty or worth of the object. It is born out of one's own integrity and a willingness to be sacrificial for the benefit of the other person. And so the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience. You need patience. And listen, there may be a storm raging inside. Check it. Okay? Be patient. Be careful in your tone. Be careful in your delivery. Kindness. You need to be kind in your delivery. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness. There's another quality that we bring to the discussion. You've got to be gentle. You've got to be gentle and employ self-control. And that's part of the fruit of the Spirit there. But these are characteristics that are very helpful to bring to the discussion. And so I think of my mom in particular, that some of the things that I learned as a field case manager, I found interesting because it applied on a very personal level when I was dealing with my mom. I helped to care for my mom the last 6 years of her life, and I tried to respect her autonomy, her right of self-determination, and I wanted to support her in the best possible way that I could. The last year and a half, the last year in particular, when she was dealing with dementia, there were times that I would show up at her little apartment and she didn't even know who I was. And she would say, "Are you my son or my grandson?" I remember the first time she asked me that. And I just said, "Pick one, Mom. Who do you like? I'll be that one." And it's kind of an aha moment. And whatever emotions are going on within you, you need to bring your strategies, you need to bring your tactics, you need to bring your skills, and you need to bring love, and you need to bring patience, and you need to bring kindness, and you need to bring gentleness. You need to bring these things to the relationship. And I remember when I would engage my mom, I fell into the trap for several months. I found myself falling into this trap because it's conditioned. It's Pavlovian. You just sort of like default. You can't help it. You just knee jerk. So you just reach out and you just say, "Mom, remember I told you to wear diapers and to put down your bed pad before you go to bed." And then I would have to catch myself and say, she doesn't remember. I mean, I could tell her something and 5 minutes later, she doesn't remember. How am I going to employ this language and expect her to comply? She can't comply. Now, when it comes to having rational conversation, one of the things I had to remind myself about as well is that when you think of a child and you engage in conversation, they may lack the capacity, but you operate on the assumption that as they grow and develop, capacity will increase. And so they're on that upward trajectory. Let me get my words. But with people with Alzheimer's and dementia, it's the inverse. It only gets worse with time. It doesn't get better. And so the sooner that you can acclimate to the new normal and realize and evaluate the situation properly and then adjust yourself to it, the better off everybody will be. And I had to learn this. And this was a big challenge for me. And so I had to keep reapplying. I had to keep thinking about it when I approached her. And again, it's one of those things where you have to be willing to honor your mother and father. And as a Christian, as somebody who comes from a biblical worldview, when I come, I want to honor my mother. Now, my father died back in '94. I didn't have the privilege of caring for him, but Mom, I did. And so I wanted to be that good son. But again, when I approached her, I had to come with love, with kindness, with gentleness, with patience. And I had to come with the right tone, with the right body language, And there were times where, you can come into the home and you can structure it. I had to get rid of tripping hazards. I had to remove any barriers in her home. My wife and I bought her a chair, a little recliner. I made the mistake of buying one that was fabric. I wish I'd not made that decision, because she was dealing with incontinence issues and, 2 episodes over 2 days, and we had to throw it out. Had to get another one that was leather. Faux leather works too, but something where you can clean it up. Wound up having to buy a mattress with there's these plastic zip containers. I hate to call it a container. It's something that goes over the mattress and you can zip it so that it stays on there, because I had to throw out a mattress because of incontinence issues. And so when I would come and I would try to care for her, it was helping her with incontinence supplies. It was helping her with food. I got a caregiver set up to come into her home. I had to try to be mindful about the clothes that I bought her and be willing to accept the fact that you're just going to have to replace a lot of that stuff. It's just not going to be there because it's going to be damaged over time. But as I continued on in my care for her, that continued cognitive decline became one of the biggest challenges that I faced, because she would give stuff away. I have a lovely sister who bought my mom a tablet, a Kindle tablet, and my mom was fiddling with it one day and then threw it in the trash. And, my mom didn't know. She didn't know what she was doing. And it was just one of those things where you just have to just chalk that off. That's gone, okay? I bought my mom a smartphone. Well, as her cognitive decline progressed, she got frustrated with it because she didn't know how to operate. It was too advanced for her. 1.5 years, 2 years earlier, she'd have been fine. But I had to get rid of that. Again, that was money gone. And I had to bite the bullet. I had to pay for it, right? So it's money gone, and you buy her a flip phone with a few buttons on it, big buttons. And these are just some of the things that you deal with. And so whether I'm dealing with my clients or family member, these are just issues that we run into as case managers and just as human beings. But again, we want to see people as having intrinsic value, as being made in the image of God, and even though they're impacted by sin and the effects of sin, and that you can see people begin to experience a cognitive decline, whatever that's predicated on, that you can say, you know what, I love you, I'm committed to you, and I'm going to give of myself and my resources with an open hand, and I'm not going to let emotion drive, this relationship. I'm going to operate more on the base of wisdom than emotion and circumstances. You've got to operate on the basis of wisdom, not circumstances, not emotion, not anything else. You have to be committed to that person in love. And you have to be willing to be kind and gentle and patient with them. Again, these are just normal things that I bring when I'm interacting with my clients. But anyway, so that I don't just go on rambling, I'll close it out here. I hope that this short little presentation has been helpful, and I thank you very much, and I wish you a blessed day.